Welcome to the string theory of the unexplained. I'm your host, John Ventry, and this episode we're filming from my office in my estate in southwestern Pennsylvania. And today we're going to talk about UFOs, the Hangar One TV show, and the media. So let's go to my PowerPoint, and this is going to be a very interesting episode. I show this slide all the time because you have to start with credibility in this field. I think when we talk about the Ancient Alien TV series, that's akin to the 1950s contactee movement, where it's more entertainment than it is reality. And it's very similar to the commercials for Messing with Sasquatch and Jack Link's. It's all about entertainment, and no real scientist is going to take this field credible when you're talking about what Giorgio talks about on Ancient Aliens. But, people have asked me, what happened to the Hangar One TV series? And my answer is, I believe we got too close to the truth and it was taken down. And in particular, it was taken down because of the episodes we did on space weapons and underground bases. And an example of that is in 2009 when I was filming the UFO Hunter series with Bill Burns. We were doing two episodes in Bucks County, one with the woman Denise that saw the triangular craft with the metallic sprinkles, but we were supposed to also do an episode on Cliff, who had radar. We were able to get radar from the Philly airport there, the international airport. And when we got invited we were supposed to film this episode, we were invited up by the Philadelphia airport, and the FAA said you were not allowed to go up to the Philadelphia Tower. A half hour later, I found out that episode with the radar was canceled. So someone from the FAA called the History Channel and canceled that episode. And then 3 episodes later, Bill Burns did the episode on the Dulce underground New Mexico case, and UFO Hunters went off the air. So people at high levels do make phone calls and they do get shows killed. And I think the Hangar One show was totally true. I know it was true because each episode had a case file, and that's what the episode was based on. It was true, it was investigated, it was not just made up for television. So how do you get to the truth? That's the question. How do you get to the truth? So we know that the mainstream media, especially now with Donald Trump, there's a lot of fake stories, a lot of fake media, but the mainstream media is basically a liberal Democrat super PAC versus Fox News. And a lot of people like that, but it's very, very, very dangerous when all your information is the same, they all say the same message, and nobody is giving you a conflicting view. It's very important that you have Fox News and you have other alternative media outlets that conflicts what you're being told, because what you're being told is being managed. It is not always the truth, and in a lot of cases, not even close to being the truth. So, I never really believed in these secret societies, these secret programs, all of that. But the more I look into it, it appears that there is some of that going on. And one of the things that happened, and again, people don't like Trump, but Trump threw an absolute curveball to the New World Order. Listen to me, look at my face. The last thing you want is a New World Order. You don't want one government, one powerful leader, one military, one religion. You don't want one of anything. You want to be independent, where each country is free and independent. This New World Order falls into control by aliens or control by the Antichrist. You do not want a new world order. But Trump threw a curveball. I was on the Anderson Cooper show. This is a very important fact that came up on the Anderson Cooper show. In March of 2012, I read Wired magazine that talked about the NSA's data center in Utah that was recording every phone call, every cell phone message, every email. They were recording everything. I put this in my book in December of 2012, Apophis 2029, page 131. I get on the Anderson Cooper show in April of 2012, and I try to tell him that the government's monitoring. He kind of shut me down. He didn't want to hear it. 2013, the story breaks, if you remember. Every congressional person, every media outlet, every newspaper, news show said, we knew nothing about this. So I say to myself, how come in 2013 you knew nothing about this when I read the story in March of 2012, and in December of 2012, it's in my book on page 131. Anderson Cooper said he didn't believe me, but yet it's documented and it's factual. There was a skeptic, Joe Nickel. There were 3 witnesses there, and there was myself as the UFO investigator. And what I was surprised to find out is I filmed this in his studio. I was very happy with it. It was taped, and when it aired 10 days later, it was totally different than what happened. I gave answers that were cut out. The answers by Joe Nickel were left in to make him look good. I said something about the witnesses. The whole audience applauded. They cut it out. He said something stupid that the people, the 3 witnesses in 2 different cases, saw the planet Jupiter. The whole audience laughed at him. They cut the laughter out. I talked about different cases. The things I said that made sense and I gave very good answers were all cut out. So this is all part of how the news is managed. And it was very disappointing to do a taped show and then see the result not being how it was actually presented. But that was my appearance on Anderson Cooper, and very disappointing to see how the people are manipulated. I found this word recently. It's called agnotology. It is how ignorance arises from disinformation. When you have consensus science and you get in one story from all your media outlets, people get dumbed down, and it's disinformation that makes you believe certain facts, and it's called agnotology. Here's something that's an absolute fact. It's called the 70% rule. When you repeat a lie often enough, 70% of the people will repeat it and believe it. And that came from Adolf Hitler. When you tell a lie often enough, people will believe it. I think it was Goebbels that actually said that. So, UFOs in the media. How do you get to the truth when the news is managed? You know, there's some Pew surveys, Gallup surveys right now out that people are pulling away from mainstream media. They're looking at alternative news sites to get their facts from. Joe Rogan had a show on the Sci-Fi Channel, I believe. Joe Rogan Investigates. He did a segment on UFOs. So what does he say? He says that the UFO person is basically someone looking for attention. He's either a drug user or dreaming or hallucinating, and this is a way of getting attention. That's Joe Rogan's explanation for people who are abducted or have alien encounters. I think Joe Rogan should stick with the UFC and not UFOs. Everything they do on television is mostly for ratings. There's very little credibility. There's a lot in these TV shows that are actually faked. You also had the alien autopsy. Ray Santilli was paid over $1 million when he came out with the alien autopsy, and he finally sold the film to one of the TV channels, got $1 million for it, and it was proven afterwards it was a fake. It was not real. So he pulled the wool over on the media, but gave them what they were looking for, which was sensationalism. You know, I have to question Building 7 during 9/11. How did Building 7 collapse? It wasn't on fire. The Trade Centers fell and didn't hit it, but yet it collapsed like a controlled demolition. And I think that's what it was. There are secrets that have been kept since World War II. That continues today. That's what I tried to tell Anderson Cooper. The Manhattan Project, the stealth aircraft is 1976 technology brought out in 1988. But yet Anderson told me he doesn't think the military and the government can keep secrets. Well, they do keep secrets. They're very good at it. The CIA, the NSA, our Pentagon is world class, and they keep these secrets. And I'm actually glad they do, because I'm convinced we have aircraft and military capabilities that will keep us totally safe. But on the other hand, you've got the Constitution and it's not being adhered to, and we're not told the truth. So your choices, what do you want? Security, safety, or do you want the truth? You know, I asked, we did a conference, and I asked the speakers to talk about the most significant UFO event in history. And my version of what I said when I presented was it was the 1938 panic broadcast. That was the most significant event because it created a barrier for UFO truth. The Brookings Institute in 1960 looked at the implications of ET contact and what would happen. They cited the 1938 panic broadcast, and that set the tone for non-disclosure. This is the type of news coverage we get right now, basically laughing and making fun of UFO stories. I wrote this paper with a local engineer, Owen Eichler, on Kecksburg. We proved the Kecksburg UFO crash was actually a GE Mark II spy satellite that they were launching over Russia. It went off course on December 7th and landed in Kecksburg on December 9th. So here's the cover of the MUFON Journal. Has a top 5 UFO case been solved? And it has been solved. The local media, one newspaper ran it, the other local paper would not run it, and the reason they gave me was it would interfere with the fire department's fundraiser. So are we interested in the truth, or are we interested in fundraising for the fire department? That was the answer I was given. I can't make this stuff up, believe me. Let's take a look at Hollywood. Hollywood makes millions on sci-fi movies. 8 of the top 30 grossing films were sci-fi movies. Jodie Foster donated $200,000 to SETI. They have a goal of $5 million. Hollywood donates nothing to MUFON, who actually does the investigations. Let's take a look at reenacted news. I researched this, and the first case of reenacted news that I found was in 1915, the actual sinking of the Lusitania. What they did was they reenacted the rescue. They went to a lake. They got life preservers that said Lusitania. They got women, put them in the water, and they were swimming and rescuing the survivors of the Lusitania. It was all staged. It was new. It was reenacted news just for the cameras, and that happens a lot. I started to notice when you look at news like on CNN, for example, they're in the Middle East, and they always seem to be right in the middle of the action, which is impossible. They could not be there every time this is going on. But if you look, the front line people are very angry and serious, but if you look back 2-3 rows in the crowd, they're all smiling and laughing because they were called together to reenact what actually happened. Watch that the next time you see this on mainstream media. I throw this in only because we created a t-shirt for the Pennsylvania MUFON group, and it had an alien, and it said, "To serve man." And I had all these women saying, "I won't wear that," and guys saying, "I can't bring that home to my wife." Well, that was episode 89 of The Twilight Zone, To Serve Man, when they had a cookbook. Nobody understand it. So that's a shame, but we created that t-shirt. Very importantly, 1953, Operation Mockingbird. This is where the CIA got together with all of the mainstream media, the TV, the newspaper outlets. Alan Dulles was really the guy that was involved in this. And they recruited 400 leading journalists, and they were feeding news to the newspapers and the journalists. And the CIA basically funded movie scripts. They gave the news the way they wanted it presented. And it's proven that they were involved with the New York Times, Newsweek, Associated Press, Miami Herald, and other newspapers. The CIA got involved in 1953. We know that from Freedom of Information Acts that were filed in 1978. We got thousands of reports, went through them. You find that the famous 1953 Robertson panel was staffed with CIA people, so they were never going to tell the truth about UFOs. And the CIA boasted about how they put their people in the Robertson panel. There was a group called the Collins Elite where the CIA looked at UFOs and the paranormal. So they were investigating it after the UFOs over Washington, D.C. in July of 1952. We also found in the documents that Walter Cronkite, the most trusted guy who actually had a UFO sighting that he didn't talk about, he did a special, and it was basically in 1966 to debunk the UFO field, and he said there's nothing to UFOs. Also in the documents, 1958, Major Kehoe was on CBS, and he had a script to read from. When he deviated from the script and said that the UFOs were under intelligent control, they pulled the live feed and he went off the air. So we also know that the CIA bragged about infiltrating NICAP, the largest UFO organization, and they basically put their people in charge and as the treasurer, and they basically bankrupted the UFO organization. So the CIA is involved. So what do you believe, and why do you believe it? Is the media doing its job? Well, here's an interesting story. In March of 2012, the Associated Press requested the information on the bin Laden killing. And what happened was the Defense Department moved all the files to the CIA. And the CIA has a special dispensation from the federal government that they can put national security items in a certain file, and not even a federal judge can get them to release it. So now what they told the Associated Press was there was no record of bin Laden, of the helicopter crash, that one of them crashed, of the two helicopters. There's no DNA on bin Laden, his burial at sea. And what happened after that really was a lot of the SEAL Team 6 members involved in the killing of bin Laden were then killed in an old Chinook helicopter where they were told not to return fire, and a lot of those guys were killed. So that information was moved. So did we really kill bin Laden? Why would you move that and not tell us the truth about that? We also know that the Roswell files were lost and that the Kecksburg files were believed to be lost. But when you look at our investigation in Kecksburg, we located the guy that was in charge of the Kecksburg investigation. He said he destroyed the Kecksburg files because he didn't want an international incident, because he was told it was a Russian satellite, but it was really a U.S. spy satellite. Let's take a look at science now. What you got to understand about the scientific community is that it's basically funded to find predetermined outcomes. If they actually do solve something like cancer, diabetes, etc., that ends their funding. So think about it. How much incentive is there really for science to end their funding? What have they really cured? Polio and smallpox. That's the only real things of significance that science has cured, with all the billions of dollars that go into it. You know, you take a look at, one of the things I look at because I follow evolution and science and all of that, they say we evolved from chimps, yet chimps have 200 diseases, abnormalities. They're 96% similar to humans. Humans have 6,000 diseases and abnormalities, and you can't mate with a chimp. So how close are we really to chimps, and is that how we got here through evolution? I believe the first studies that come out that holding a cell phone to your ear is bad for you, gives you tumors, that saccharin is bad for you, then somebody pays for another study that says it's okay for you. You know, now they tell you to keep your tonsils. Well, they took mine out. I want them back. I can't get them back, but apparently you need them. There's plenty of out of place objects that are discovered, giant bones, batteries, things that shouldn't be where they are in ancient sites, and those are put aside because it doesn't fall into the scientific model, which is about getting grant money. Here's one, and this may be the most significant thing that you learn on this lecture today. The CDC. Most people think the CDC is a government organization, belongs to the government. But does it regulate, or does it spread these viruses around? The CDC owns 20 patents to vaccines that they regulate. So they tell you you have to get this vaccine, but they own that. The vaccine, they own the patent to it. They are a private organization that makes $4.6 billion a year. They own the vaccine to Ebola, SARS, hepatitis A, foot and mouth, HIV, anthrax, West Nile, Zika, and many of the pet booster shots that they tell you that you have to give. So do they introduce these into the environment every 5 years so they can make more money? How do you have the group that regulates it is actually the one that profits from it? And a law was passed, you cannot sue the CDC. So if your kid gets ill from getting a vaccine, nothing you can do about it. You can't sue them. The CDC is as federal as FedEx. They're private companies. I read this book, Carl Sagan's Demon Haunted World. The opening of it, he claims that science is open-minded, there's no dumb questions, and the whole book then went trashing everything unexplained, from UFOs to ghosts to Bigfoot. I ended up actually taking the book, tearing it in half, and throwing it away. I used it in my fireplace. And the other guy that's a hypocrite is Neil deGrasse Tyson. He doesn't believe in UFOs or life in space. He certainly says they haven't been here. But in the opening of his Cosmo show, what does he show? A UFO. Because it gets people to watch. How about the oil lie? If you lived through the 70s and then even most recently, there was an oil shortage, oil prices went through the roof. Well, we find out, and here's the cover, the news stories say we're running out of oil, but we find out that we have a 300-year supply of oil. There was never a shortage. And we have a 450-year supply of natural gas. There's no shortages. It's all about making money. Let's take a look at man-made climate change. Meteorologists say that it's a natural pattern that's caused by the sun, the heating and cooling of the earth. Climatologists say that it's caused by humans by burning fossil fuels and creating carbon. One group says one thing, the other group says something else. So I don't understand why nobody takes a look at a temperature chart. And here you go. If you look at this, the period we're living in right now, since about 1000 AD, is the coolest time in our recent history. If you look at the medieval times during the Viking times, you could see temperatures were 2 degrees warmer. If you go to the Roman times, temperatures were 4 degrees warmer than now. If you go back to Minoan era, about 6,000 years ago, the temperatures were 6 degrees warmer. So, of course we have global warming. As you can see from the chart, we're coming off a mini ice age that started around 1350 and ended in 1850. It was about 500 years. And you can see it on this chart. So is this global warming, or is this just us getting back to where we used to be? Take a look at another chart here. And again, you can see this is Europe. You can see how we're way below the temperatures during the Viking era that was around 900 AD. You can see that in red. You can see where we are. And it was caused by the mini ice age, but nobody wants to tell you that. They want to regulate this and put taxes on carbon. Here's 450,000 years. You can take a look at the spike in temperature and the drop in temperature. The drop in temperature on each one of these charts is where you had an ice age. It shows, I believe, 5 major ice ages in the last 450,000 years. They range every 100,000 years, let's say, every 90,000 years. Okay, look at where we are now. We're warming up, but we're not where we were for the last ice age that occurred 125,000 years ago. We're going to continue to warm up for a few more thousand years, and then it's going to start getting cold. The last thing you want is cold. You can live in warm weather. When an ice age comes, that will devastate more than any global warming will ever devastate. But this is not what you're told. They tell you that the oceans are rising. Well, that's not true. Ice that's over water, glaciers, they've already displaced the water. The water doesn't get any higher when they melt. Put ice cubes in a cup, walk away, come back, wait till they melt. The water level is the exact same. It doesn't go any higher than when there was ice cubes or when it was water. So you're not told the truth. Ice that's on land that melts adds to the oceans. Ice that's over the oceans, in the oceans, where most of it is that's going to melt, does not add to the rise in seawater. We're being lied constantly, and here's your examples. You can believe me, or you cannot believe me. We have the globalization lie. I remember in the 90s, This is good for America. We're going to move major companies out around the world, and this is going to lower prices. Well, you're now making $10 an hour when you go to work, so you can save a nickel at Walmart. This was not good. We lost manufacturing jobs. We lost union jobs. There's competition for minimum wage, and the only thing that really happened was corporate profits went up and CEOs make $20 million now. It did nothing for the middle class and for jobs in this country. Here's a very uncomfortable slide for a lot of people, and I don't know why. And that's the Out of Africa spin. This was basically a 1990s disinformation story to support affirmative action. It was based on finding Lucy in Africa and saying that this was the oldest find and we had to have come from Africa. Yet, when you look up the oldest DNA is from Australia. It's Aboriginal DNA is the oldest DNA. The second oldest DNA is Spanish DNA. And the Russians have proven there is no African DNA in Russia or Eastern Europeans. Zero. There is none. What they did was when they found Lucy from Africa, that DNA had more enzymes in it. And what they said was if there are more enzymes than Europeans or Asians or Hispanics, more meant it came first. But yet when they dated the DNA, they found out that was not the oldest DNA. So this is being spun also. There's been very little research on Asian DNA, and 25% of everybody on Earth is Asian, and we really haven't done a lot of research into that. If you take the religious perspective, after the flood, in Babel, we're all one human race. We were given different languages and different appearances. You also have stories of Atlantis and Antarctica. When you talk about Kwanzaa, that was created in 1967. There is no African Christmas holiday in Africa named Kwanzaa. And what you got to remember, I don't believe the evolution story. I believe the creation story. But when you look at evolution, and you pound your chest that we came out of Africa and we were first. Well, the way evolution works is you evolve, and that means you get better. And the last group to evolve is the most advanced. I wouldn't be pounding my chest that we came out of Africa. I believe in creation and not evolution. Another story that we're not told in schools is slavery in America. Who were the first slaves in America? In 1625, the Irish were brought to America as slaves. The British were selling the Irish to America to be slaves because they were Catholic and no other reason. And when you look into this and actually read the information, the Irish were treated worse than any slave group. It cost more to purchase an African than an Irish. The African slave was treated better than the Irish slave. No group in history for slavery has been treated as bad in the modern times as the Irish were. And you don't find this in any textbooks, but the truth about slavery, the Irish were the first slaves and they were treated the worst. And it occurred in 1625. Here's another one, another lie we're not told. We're finding soft tissue in dinosaur fossils. And here's a professor, Mark Armitage, who was fired from Cal State because he released information of soft tissue found in a Triceratops dinosaur. Well, if they're 65 million years old, how do you have soft tissue in them? I don't believe the carbon dating because radiometric carbon dating lasts for 30,000 years. Radiometric dating only works when the environment is static and not jumbled up from asteroid strikes, earthquakes, volcanoes, floods. It doesn't work. And I think the fact that soft tissue has been found in a number of dinosaur bones tells you it can't be 65,000 years old. It's probably more in the 20,000 range. And I believe that humans and dinosaurs did coexist. Let's take a look at gun violence. All right, we want to eliminate guns. So where do most of the deaths come from? Well, tobacco use is number one. Medical errors is number two. There are more homicides committed with baseball bats, heroin, and cars than guns. So what they do, if you look at the two bottom numbers, is you have homicides at 11,000 and suicides at almost 17,000. They add the suicides to the murders, and they tell you that's gun violence. Well, I think if somebody's going to commit suicide, they're going to commit suicide, whether it's with drugs, a gun, slitting their wrists, jumping off a bridge. It's very dishonest. But the bottom line you see here, most homicides are committed with baseball bats and then drugs and not guns. Let's take a look at Yellowstone. And when I got into this, I started talking about the Yellowstone supervolcano. And what I found out after the fact was in 2006, the government actually believed the Yellowstone supervolcano was going to erupt. They purchased 1 billion hollow tip bullets, they purchased caskets, and they created the internment camps that you see on the right of the screen. On the left of the screen, you see where the ash would have fallen and taken out the breadbasket of the United States. So the biggest threat to humanity right now is the Yellowstone supervolcano, and they actually believed it was going to erupt somewhere between 2006 and 2008. And the only problems I've ever had, I've never gotten visited by the government, the men in black. 4 times when I talked about the Yellowstone supervolcano, either the radio show almost went off the air and twice actually went off and we had to get back on. And one time I had a helicopter hovering over my house, and you can hear it on the radio show while I was talking about the Yellowstone supervolcano. Now here's an example of radiometric dating. Mount St. Helens blows up. They wait 10 years. They say, let's carbon date, let's radiometric date the lava and see what it tells you. We know it's only 10 years old. The dating came in at between 350,000 years and 2.8 million years. So how can you trust what they're telling you when we know this happened only 10 years afterwards? They could not date Mount St. Helens correctly. Not 10 years, as many as 2.8 million years off. I don't believe any of the information that they tell us when it comes to backdating. Our economy, we were told in 26 that the recovery has happened. We have 5% unemployment, but what really happened? We had 4% less people working. So we really had 9% unemployment. Family income was down by $4,000 per family. The stock market was at an all-time high. And what did we do with inflation? When something goes up, we take it out of the inflation model. You cannot believe what you're told. So this is what you see. You're allowed to see 20%, 80%. You're not shown. Who did their due diligence? The media didn't, because the media is part of this cover-up. The CIA, the NSA, they certainly did, because they're part of the disinformation we get. Science has its own agenda to get grant money. And, I liked the 1939 Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And on the 10-year anniversary of September 11th, the winning lottery number, 911. So tell me that wasn't staged. It was phony. It was phony like everything else we're told. So Voltaire said this, how do you get to the truth? It's dangerous to be right in matters on which the established authorities are wrong. So when you're talking about what you know is right and they don't want you to say it, you get silenced. Then I took a look at what would Jesus say. And what I found out was 40% of people don't believe in him anymore. I don't know how this world changed in one lifetime, but people are more interested in what the Kardashians and Miley Cyrus say. They're interested in alternative content. You look at the media, there seems to be a contempt for religion and Christians. And I don't know, I looked at the Constitution, it says freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. All right, so let's take a look a little bit at UFOs. You have the Kepler satellite. There's over 1,000 billion galaxies. You can see the numbers on how many stars, how many planets. The number of Earth-like planets in the universe is a 16 with 22 zeros after it. There's 8.8 billion Earth-like planets just in the Milky Way. And they say there's more Earth-like planets than there are grains of sand on the beach. So the thing you got to keep in mind, though, is that unless you can prove the theory of evolution is correct, then there are no aliens in space. They had to evolve. And so far, they have not proven that evolution is a fact. It's a theory, and it's not proof. Major Kehoe was one of my favorites. He was the director of NICAP. He used to battle the Air Force and the CIA and the Condon Commission. And he said, the one book he wrote, he said, I write this in defiance of the Air Force and CIA. He actually gave Captain Ruppelt 15 confidential files so Ruppelt could write his book. That would never happen today. And when they debunked him on that television show, Ray Barker put together the World UFO Conference, and Frank Edwards went, and they were going to speak. Well, Edwards dies of a heart attack the morning of the conference, and Gray Barker was told the night before that Edwards would never be allowed to testify at your conference. So, do ufologists get knocked off? They certainly do. So here's an important thing to know. 1954, the military met with the airline industry, and they got the airline industry to adopt military restrictions that if a pilot reported a UFO, he would be subject to espionage laws, 10 years in prison, and a $10,000 fine. What happened in 1958 was Captain Killian saw a UFO. He did report it. He was threatened. He went to the media. They never prosecuted him. We also have the famous 1986 Japan Airlines Flight 1628, where the captain reported a mile-long UFO over Alaska, and he was given a desk job. This is real important, too. There's a group out there called FREE. It's the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters. It's made up of 12 PhD scientists. They're basically New Age believers that alien abductions are good. They did a survey, and what they said was 85% of abductions are a positive experience, and it'll change you for the better. So what I said to the founder was, one, I think they got the results that they wanted to get. I said, if alien abduction is so good, why don't you offer your children or grandchildren up to the UFOs and see how it turns out? You say 85% of it's a positive experience. That has to be better than getting a public school education. What I look at is the animal reactions and their instinctual reactions to aliens, and they are violent. Animals react instinctively. They do not like aliens, same as they don't like demons. So I think the FREE organization is nothing but propaganda, part of the disinformation that you're being told to get you to believe something. And it's a great deception is what it is. Just recently, you find Google, Facebook, PayPal are controlling your content. When President Trump ran for president, Google fixed the searches, so when you looked for him, you couldn't find him on Google. It only gave you the Hillary information. Facebook and PayPal recently turned off far-right conservative groups, turned off their sites. They're steering traffic to correct-thinking, left-thinking sites. That's very dangerous. You might be happy with that. When you don't have an alternative view, it's extremely dangerous. They demonize alternative news sites, but what they're basically doing is they're setting the flag for a false flag operation and for propaganda. The United States ranks number 46 now in free speech. How do you get to the truth? We should be number 1 in free speech. We're number 46. What I do know is that the UFO field is full of entertainment. There's not a lot of facts is what's presented in a lot of the TV shows and the books you read. And it's also full with retaliation. These ufologists are trying, they all want to be the one. And they're not going to be the one. And they retaliate against each other. And I was a recipient of that retaliation. So this is my media group, The String Theory of the Unexplained. These are my episodes. They're now being filmed at my estate in Weston, Pennsylvania. And that's our show, and I will see you next week.